Hey, this is Chad with Drawn and Cornered. It is September 24th, 2021. Drawn and Cornered distills down all of the information out there into a few news stories every day with a little bit of analysis, everything you need to know to get through the day with news, politics, international, anything that's out there. That sounds like the sort of thing you're interested in. Definitely subscribe to the channel, hit that bell so you get notifications every time we release, which is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. If anything big happens over the weekend, you'll hear from us then as well. This is the news you need for today. First off, the election audit that occurred in Arizona that everybody was up in arms about has come back showing little to no fraud issues, nothing that certainly would have changed that election, but essentially everything's fine. There's a couple of problems in there, but really small, ultimately landing at something in the neighborhood of like 300, 400 votes. Not that big of a deal. But this is what's going to be really interesting about this story. Is for a long time, the left railed against this audit as being completely partisan, being hackery, there's no credibility in this whatsoever. And now they'll lean on it and say, see, no fraud. The opposite side, the right, leaned on this extraordinarily heavily at the beginning, been like, this is where we're finally going to find out. They grabbed all these ballots, they did all these secret searches and audits, and we're moving these numbers against those numbers, and some things that seemed kind of in the dark, but ultimately just auditing these ballots. Now they will call it even more fraud or issues with systemic election problems going all the way into even the auditing type companies. And everybody's going to flip sides on this really quickly. It's going to be kind of interesting to watch. But the takeaway is that, believe or not believe, we still haven't come across anything resulting in significant fraud or massive numbers of votes that were put in incorrectly. Now, you want to talk about real issues, you start going up to Pennsylvania, where the legislature is supposed to be enacted and engaged in any changes to election law that occurred. That did not happen this past year. There was a single unilateral rule that was changed to put out mail-in balloting and extend hours and all these things that cannot be put through by their constitution without the legislature being involved. The legislature wasn't involved. Those are issues, I think, where you've got a little bit more grounds to say that this election was off. And obviously it's not something that's going to overturn the election, but there were a lot of things that weren't done properly in changing the laws for COVID in a bunch of these. And now the For the People Act, which the Dems are trying to push through and continue to try to push through, basically federalizes a lot of those rules, takes all of it away from the states to build their own laws and run elections as they see fit. It all goes to the federal level. It's a gross overreach of government. Should never happen. And if it does, I imagine it'll be battled significantly when it does. Second news story that you need to know, or I guess kind of an addendum to the first, is that Texas now, almost immediately after Trump called for an audit in Texas, which he won, said that they're going to be auditing, I want to say 4 of their biggest counties to see if they can find any fraud. Now, this may seem strange move because Trump won Texas, but I think this shows that he is looking for any area where he can point to fraud and say, this is what happened everywhere, or everywhere I didn't win. So if he can find it in the friendliest of states, maybe he can find it in some of the less friendly states. And it feels like grasping. It is grasping. None of the Kraken claims that we had from the beginning of massive voter fraud in the numbers of tens of thousands, we've seen nothing even remotely close to that. And I feel like everybody's sort of getting tired of it a little bit. So much so that when Trump says it now, nobody but his most staunch supporters think that it's real. It's completely flown into the area of denying the moon landing or flat earthers. It's just nobody's paying attention to it anymore. And I think that is going to be a major problem for Republicans moving into 22 and certainly in 24, that either you follow this guy down the rabbit hole of believing that any of this is true, or you abandon it altogether and just say, hey, election was lost, let's get over it. We cannot have this guy saying that elections were tainted running at the head of the party in 24. Just one of those choices has to be made, or he has to flip his story really quickly here, because the echoes of that are gonna stretch a lot further. Second story, not the addendum, but the actual second story. So the FDA approved booster shots, or the group came forward and said booster shots are probably a good idea for 65 and older, and made recommendations about high-risk workers and things like that. CDC had its own analysts take a look at it. CDC analysts said, no, we'll go 65 and above. We won't go below that as far as age is concerned, and we will not include at-risk workers. The CDC director, Rochelle Lewinsky, said, no, we're going to do away with that expert advice, and we're going to offer them, and we're going to recommend booster shots for at-risk workers. For a administration that was so hard on the science, for Joe Biden to come forward long before anybody had approved boosters for anyone, saying that booster shots are going to be necessary for a bunch of different people, which feels a little bit like the executive leading the science as opposed to listening to the science, now is doing essentially the same thing, that you see bureaucrats leading the experts into the science, or what they believe the science should be. So we'll see how the booster shot thing comes down, and how widely that's pushed, how heavy that's pushed, and if they continue to try and make COVID a thing that needs to be feared, needs to be gone after as far as booster shots are concerned, and who deserves booster shots as opposed to who deserves first shots. It's going to be a whole thing. The last story, the House just today passed a bill kind of codifying Roe v. Wade into federal law. This is a direct challenge to what's going on in Texas with their abortion law, where they're kind of running bounties on those who commit abortions or aid in abortions. This is going to be an idea to kind of bring all of that authority up to the federal government. Again, gross overreach. This is not the way that it's supposed to work. House passed it. It's never going to get past the Senate, but I think that's sort of the point, is that you're going to see abortion be pushed as a major issue in 22 and probably also in 24, but they're going to try and ride the abortion wave again, because they think that has a lot more legs than, let's say, the immigration debacle right now, than Afghanistan right now, than the economy right now. All of those things are going bad, so they're trying to find footing, the Democrats, on something they think they can hate their hat and their base will respond to. Abortion's probably one of those things. It's not necessarily a bad move. We'll just see if it's loud enough or vocal enough to do away with all that other noise. Those are the news stories you need to know today. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, want to tell me I'm totally crazy, do that down below. Again, if you like this sort of bite-sized content of your news, get a little bit in there, a little bit of analysis, everything you need to know to go talk to all your friends and know what's going on out there in the world, subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a good weekend, and I will see you again on Monday.